What can we learn about living the good life by studying the lives of Socrates and Alcibiades? Although many people think of living the good life as being based on material success, we can learn a lot from Socrates and Alcibiades, who both represent dramatically different approaches to living the good life. Socrates pursued virtue through learning, while Alcibiades pursued pleasure and success. Their respective experiences offer us essential insights into what the good life is and how to live it. We can get these insights through examining three things: the way they lived their lives, the work that they accomplished, and the way that they met their ends. Number one, the way that they lived their lives. Alcibiades was the nephew of Pericles, who was the leader in Athens at the time, and he was a rambunctious young child and very determined. There's one story that when he was young, he was in a wrestling match and he was losing. So, being very determined, he decided that he would win by biting the other boy. So he did, and he ended up winning the match, nearly biting through the kid's arm. He then faced accusations that he bit like a girl. Plutarch says, quote, "You bite, Alcibiades, like a girl." "Not I," said Alcibiades. "I bite like a lion." Another story says that he stopped the flute playing program kind of at his school. He refused to play the flute because he didn't like the way it plugged up his mouth and made his face look weird. This kind of started a protest at the school, and they no longer required this after this. One last story goes that he was playing a game of knucklebones, and one of them fell into the path of a chariot. He yelled for the charioteer to stop, but he didn't. So instead, he dove in front, challenging the man to run him over. This got him to stop, and he got to grab his knucklebone. This kind of gives you a look into his behavior, and many of these behaviors would follow him into his adult life as well. Socrates, on the other hand, was very different. He grew up in an upper middle class family, and he was apprenticed under Aspasia. She was a very smart woman who was essentially the wife of Pericles. This is also likely how they knew each other from a young age, Alcibiades being the nephew of Pericles. Socrates was always a very ugly person, and this is pretty commonly known. Alcibiades, on the other hand, was a very attractive person for almost his whole life. And this is kind of a key difference as well in their personalities and how they behaved in the world. On to point two, their work. They both had military careers. Socrates, for much of his career, was just a lowly hoplite, while on the other hand, Alcibiades became a great general. He was on a military council, and he made multiple alliances with other countries that lasted over 100 years, and held leadership in this position for over 15 years. Socrates was on an Athenian assembly. Once, there was a battle with the Spartans. Many Athenian ships were destroyed in this battle. The generals who were fighting this decided to leave the men who were still in the water to go and pursue the Spartans. This caused a lot of men to die and caused a lot of uproar in Athens. And many people were calling for the death of these generals. So the assembly that Socrates was on sentenced him to death. Sentenced him to death. Socrates, however, he was able to block the vote from happening, and he said on the grounds that they should all follow the law, not necessarily what all the people wanted. This was kind of a very emotional issue, and many of the people of Athens were very upset about this, and this would have caused tremendous pressure on the council. Socrates was also a philosopher. This was kind of his hobby, and throughout his life, he gained a reputation throughout all of Athens. He heard once that the oracle said he was the wisest man in Athens. Upon hearing this news, he attempted to prove the oracle wrong, and spent much time trying to find a man who was wiser than him. In the end, he concluded that he was the wisest man in Athens, simply because no one else was able to admit that they didn't know anything. Alcibiades convinced Athens, in his military career, to invade Sicily. This was a big move, and he did it saying that the internal political turmoil would cause them to be weak. However, before this expedition left, someone had damaged statues of Hermes across the country, and this was a big deal. Many people blamed Alcibiades for this, being the rambunctious person that he is. And the punishment for this would be death. So, as a result, he fled to Sparta. There, in Sparta, he rose to power and was actually able to mount an attack against the Athenians with the help of the Persians. Oh shoot, I forgot my quote. When he was going to attack Sicily, this is the reason he gave for doing so. Quote, "Great men leave behind them a reputation for the ages that leads others who are not related to them to claim them as their ancestors." End quote. He later concluded this thought with, quote, "I aspire to be such a great man." End quote. On to point 3, their deaths. First, Socrates. As time passed, many of Socrates' students grew up and became involved in politics and in general life in Athens. They were usually, however, somewhat anti-democratic. This was an issue, and a lot of people saw this as an issue and blamed Socrates for this. And he got charged with atheism and corrupting the youth. When he was charged with this, they asked him what he thought that his punishment should be, and he replied that he thought he should get a reward instead of a punishment. For this, he was sentenced to death. When he was awaiting his death, many of his friends offered him, made a way for him to escape. However, he declined. He decided that he wanted to follow the law. So, when the day came, he finally died. He drank poison. He was forced to drink poison, and that's how he met his end. Before his death, someone asked him why he was so calm. And he said that he was calm because if there was a final judgment, that he had done his very best, and he couldn't have done better. But if there wasn't, then he was going to rest. Next, the death of Alcibiades. Alcibiades had made a lot of enemies over the years, and once he was traveling to go to Persia. This was when he finally met his end. A gang of assassins, most likely Spartans, surrounded his house and set it on fire. As he was trying to escape, they shot him with arrows. After this, he was buried there outside that house by his girlfriend. Plutarch says, quote, "His girlfriend then took his body, covered it, and wrapped it in her own garments because his own clothing had been burned in the fire." End quote. So he came to a dramatic end on his way to Persia and was buried right there in the ground. So, although many people think that the good life was based in material success, Socrates and Alcibiades can show us a lot about how to live the good life and represent dramatically different approaches to it. Socrates pursued virtue through learning, while Alcibiades pursued pleasure and success. Their respective experiences offer us essential insights into what the good life is and how to live it. Thank you.